This episode of the Practice of Therapy podcast is brought to you by TherapyNotes, TherapyNotes.com, and also by Green Oak Accounting, GreenOakAccounting.com. This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, helping you to navigate your private practice journey. This is session number 162 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, everyone. I'm Gordon Brewer. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a good week or weekend whenever you might be listening to this. And if this is your first time here, glad you found us. Glad you're with me on this journey. I'm so glad that you joined me for this particular episode. I'm real excited for you to hear from my guest that's coming up, Susan Orenstein. And Susan has been in practice quite a while, but she's also really honed in on a niche and really is taking what she has learned about that niche and really applying it outside the therapy room. And she has a podcast, and you'll get to hear more about that. But I'm looking forward to you hearing about that, because I think one of the things that I've said in previous episodes here is that there seems to be like themes that come up for me in the podcast. And one is just around being able to provide services and provide things outside the therapy room as a way to diversify your income and also just really feed your creative side, because I think that's an important part in our own development, is just being able to do those creative things that mean a lot to us. So we'll get to Susan here in a minute, but one of the things I wanted to let you know about is I've talked about this before on the podcast, but it's really happening now, and that is the updates that I am creating to the G Suite for Therapists course. Now, first, the big update that I'll let you know about is that the name has changed. It's now going to be called Google Workspace for Therapists, and the reason for that is that Google changed their branding. But this past week, I've been working on changing some of the videos and really updating a lot of the lessons in that particular course. It's a course that has about 5 modules to it with different lessons on how to use the tools of Google Workspace. And if you're familiar with Gmail or any of those kinds of things, you are familiar with Google. I think a lot of folks are much more familiar with Google than ever before, particularly with what we've gone through with COVID and just meeting online and all that sort of thing. Google Meet is the platform that is used within Google for doing conferencing, and so I know a lot of people are using that. But the one thing about using Google Workspace that some people might not be aware of is that you can set that up so that it is HIPAA secure and HIPAA compliant. You do need to have a paid account through Google. You can't just use a regular free Gmail account and make everything HIPAA secure. You do need to have that paid account. But anyway, in this course, Google Workspace for Therapists, I walk people through using some of the different tools. And right now I'm in the middle of updating the course and adding new materials and updating some of the older materials. But the course is still up and live. And if you have registered for the course or purchased it in the past, you're going to see those updates, because once you enroll in the course, you have lifetime access to it. So you always get the updates with that. But anyway, I just want to bring that up because once I get all the updates in place, the price is going to change. So take advantage of the current price. It's only $98, and it's about 6 hours of instruction. It'd probably take you a full day to go through the course if you just sat down and did it back to back. I don't necessarily say that that's the way to do it. Some people prefer to, but there's a lot of material there, and you'll have access to different templates and how to set up your own session note helper. All of those kinds of things are included in the course. So be sure and check that out. It's still under the old URL, which is practiceoftherapy.com /G Suite course. You can still get to that, and that'll take you to the Teachable platform or to the webpage that'll get you to the Teachable platform, and you can still get it at that particular price. Like I said, I'm updating it, also creating a new course that's going to be coming out a little bit later this spring, or later this winter or early spring, and it is on Google Workspace as a private practice platform. And so we go into more of the nuts and bolts of just how to set up G Suite as a platform in your practice, because there are a lot of therapists that are using it that way. And so this, the G Suite for Therapists course, I'm still using the old name, Google Workspace for Therapists course, really kind of teaches you a lot of the basics around how to apply the tools of Google Workspace to private practice. But the Google Workspace as a practice platform really goes more into the detail and nuts and bolts of how to create an actual platform and dashboards and that sort of thing in your practice that you can use either as a standalone kind of thing for your practice, or use it in conjunction like I do with my electronic health records system, which is TherapyNotes, who are the gracious sponsors of this particular podcast. So anyway, just wanted to make you aware of that, and be sure and check that out. Google, it's practiceoftherapy.com /G Suite course. And I'm still having to reteach myself the new branding. It's actually Google Workspace for Therapists now. So anyway, and that's because of Google's change in branding. So be sure and check that out. Also, before we get to Susan, I'd love for you to go and check out our sponsors for the podcast. TherapyNotes.com is the leading electronic health record system for private practices and mental health providers. It's what they specialize in. And they have got a patient portal that is second to none. It is also, they have a telehealth portal available in their platform, so it's all in one place. They're who I use in my practice. They also file insurance claims electronically and have a scheduler and all those things that you need in your practice to make it run efficiently. So be sure and check that out. TherapyNotes.com. And if you'll use the promo code just Gordon, Gordon, you can get 2 months of their services for free. And also be sure and check out Green Oak Accounting, greenoakaccounting.com. You know, it's that time of year. I just got through filling out my 1099 forms and W-2 forms for my employees. And so we're starting to get into tax season, and there is no better time than now to talk to the folks at Green Oak Accounting. Julie and her team will do a free consultation with you to talk about your needs and help you get going in the right direction for your practice, whether you're a solo practice owner or a group practice. They are the experts when it comes to the financial side of private practice. So, thanks again for joining us for this podcast. And without further ado, here's my guest, Susan Orenstein. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the Practice of Therapy podcast. And I'm so happy for you to get to know today Susan Orenstein. Susan, welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and talk to you, Gordon.
Yes, and one of the things, kind of a fun fact when I started talking to Susan is I realized she is her office is located in my hometown on the same street that I grew up on. So how weird is that? So
That's pretty weird.
yeah. So that's just an awesome connection there. So Susan, again, happy to have you with me. And why don't, as I start with everyone, why don't you tell folks a little bit about your private practice journey and how you've kind of landed where you've landed?
Okay. So I've been in practice since 1998. I've stopped counting the years. And I remember when I joined a group practice initially, and the psychologist who took me on, who has since passed away, was really brilliant in saying, you need to have a specialty. You need to have something that makes you distinct. And so I had two specialties at that time. One was helping young adults through the transition to college. And then the other specialty was couples counseling. And I love the work. I love these specialties, which really are about helping people through transitions, helping people evolve and go through a journey. And so the last few years, I've been focusing more on helping individuals going through divorce, to help them through the journey, through the transition. And it kind of covers all the things that I've been learning about in my counseling practice. You get to touch upon mood issues, coping, grief, loss, and you get to talk about sex. You get to talk about relationships. You get to talk about people's childhood, their past, their present, and their future dreams. So I feel like this specialty is wonderful in that it lets me help people in a really holistic way.
Right, right. And what I love is the fact that you've kind of taken your niche and kind of expanded it outside the therapy room. You want to talk about that process? Just with, you started a podcast and also are doing some courses and that sort of thing.
Sure, I would love to. So I want my work to be accessible to more people. And so I developed a podcast. It's called After the First Marriage. And right now I have a free e-course that goes with that. I'm developing a lot of content because I particularly love continuing it. I love podcasts. I love going online and looking at a worksheet, doing some reading, joining groups. So there's so many ways that people can heal outside of the therapy room. And I wanted to be a part of somebody developing those things for our clients.
Yes, yes. And so what have you learned so far in this process?
Good question. What have I learned so far? Well, to be a podcaster and to write a course pushes me in a way that's a little different than the therapist role, because I think in the therapist role, I learned not to say too much about myself. I mean, I do share some, but in some ways it's more conventional when I do counseling, whereas when I have a podcast, I get to bring more of myself in. I get to think about who interests me. Who do I want to learn from? What am I reading? Who do I want to interview? I get to create fun materials with color and content. So it's, what am I learning? I'm learning that there are parts of me that I can bring into this process in ways that expand my ability to be a therapist.
Yes, yes. Yeah. You know, what's interesting about that is right before we got online here to record, I was doing some, was working with another therapist. I'm an AAMFT approved supervisor. And one of the parts of that process is that for other people that want to become supervisors, they do their supervision of supervision. And so we were just talking about that whole topic of the person of the therapist and bringing, you know, being able to do some self-disclosure in the therapy room, and just really the effectiveness of that in working with clients, and that I think it gives you more credibility when they can hear from a therapist that they've gone through similar struggles.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
and Gordon, I hear like that you're doing supervision. I know you have a podcast too. I think just after, I don't know about you, but after I've been doing this work for as many years as I have, it's fun just to shake it up and to feel like I need to learn something and I can have a learning curve. So
right.
It's fun to learn about social media. I've actually, to be honest, I really have not been involved in it myself. And So I'm learning about that too.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah. I like it. You want to say more about that in terms of just shaking things up and really kind of taking some non-conventional routes to working with people and how you're doing your work?
Sure. Um, so I think like right now there are support groups, there are podcasts. Some of them are run by lay people. I want to be able to bring some of the professional skills that I have and some of the research to these formats and to shake it up, meaning to bring these out to the public in ways that maybe that public hasn't seen before. So what I really want to do is just tear down the stigma that's still attached to being a therapy client. I want to normalize these processes for people because almost everybody cares about healthy relationships and to get skills and to learn about this and to make it approachable and accessible to people is really important to me.
Right.
And so I can do that through, things that are free for people like podcasts or social media.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it sounds like, I agree with podcasting. I think it's just really a way to reach people it's such a much more personal media than say blogging or, kind of written material, and that you get a sense of kind of connecting with the person on the other end, even though you're just listening to a recording of something. It's just, I think people make that connection. And I'm curious, and feel free to share as much or as little as you want to, just kind of how you landed on this niche of divorce. And having, I'll just self-disclose too. I've been previously married, to my former wife, and then married now to my wife for over 25 years. But having gone through a previous marriage, kind of understand the pain of that. So,
Right.
Yeah.
So what's a little interesting and what made me a little bit hesitant to come up with this niche. Well, it is my niche because I love these clients in my private practice. So I've always loved working with couples. I always love working with any kind of relationship issues. So professionally, some of my very favorite clients have been people who feel like they've been kicked to the curb. They are so down, they cannot get their head up, and they are so grateful to have therapy and to have someone believe in them and to have someone help them kind of do a post-mortem and say, what happened? Let's figure this out so that this doesn't happen again. And you can regain your self-esteem and you can gain some tools for intimacy in the future. So really some of my very favorite clients have been people going through divorce. But what I started to say is how I was hesitant to turn this into a podcast has been because I am happily married and I got married at 24. My husband and I started dating at 21 and it's been beautiful. We haven't had any threats to divorce. We haven't been divorced. So I can't say I know personally what divorce is, but what I can say is that I have never taken him for granted and he has never taken me for granted. And all the tools that I've learned with the couples that I work with in the trainings I've gone through, I apply in my marriage. And I think, thank goodness I can see what's going on and I know how to push pause here. I know how to go back to him and tell him what I need. And how would I possibly know that if I didn't have all the training and skills? I didn't see that from my parents. I think what we know from the literature is it's about 50% of people who grow up with secure attachment, where they have parents who have been attuned and they see that kind of family. So for the many, many other people out there, thank goodness we can learn these things and we can see these things. So I wanted to be able to give that to people.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's, one of the things is that I know in my work with couples as well, I'm a marriage and family therapist. And so I would say over half my practice is couples work. And, as I like to tell folks is, neither one of you came with an instruction manual on how to, communicate with each other. And like you said, even though we might come from healthy families, that doesn't necessarily guarantee a healthy marriage. And so
That's
being
right.
able to communicate that. So, yeah.
And there's so much misinformation out there. So there are these hugely popular bestsellers like Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus that have a few good points in them, but mostly carry a lot of misinformation. And so I want to make sure that people, and there's a lot of science now out there from John Gottman, from my mentor, Stan Tatkin, about what really are the ingredients for healthy relationships, whether you're getting divorced and you want to make sure you learn next time, or you want to make your marriage work. So I want to be one of those people who is providing outreach so people can get the correct information.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So this is a very broad question, but what sort of themes do you see that come up with people in the work that you do? What are some of the themes that you feel like people struggle with the most?
Sure. And that's a great question, because I think there are themes, and I've done a little research too. If I'm seeing somebody going through divorce who didn't choose divorce, they were the one that was left, then those kind of folks are often very wounded, have hurt self-esteem, depression, anxiety, questioning their attractiveness, questioning their desirability. I've seen people really, really on the floor with crushing self-doubt and low self-esteem. Sometimes with those people who have been the ones that have been left, they have revenge fantasies. They're angry, they're bitter. So sometimes I see the coping mechanism is to shut down. And sometimes it's, I'm going to fight back and I'm going to have these revenge fantasies and get into a lot of conflict. And a lot of times people are just hurting so badly, they're looking for ways to numb themselves. So they might start drinking heavily, eating more, turning to relationships that aren't good for them, just ways to numb their feelings. So those are the common issues that I see. When it's somebody who's actually the one initiating the divorce, and I don't think I see quite as many of those as the people who were not choosing it. The people who initiated, sometimes there's a lot of guilt and shame. And sometimes there's just, how do I help my children? Give me some skills and tools so that I do this right, because maybe I've seen ugly divorce. I don't want that. So people who are wanting to be proactive, which is wonderful.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I think it's having worked with a few people that have been in that same situation, where just their partner left them just kind of out of the blue, or just unawares, or they didn't really see the warning sign, so to speak. There's a lot of self-blame that happens, again, and working through that, and the grief of it all as well. So.
And then, Gordon, there's a third category that's really tricky for me, and probably for a lot of therapists, and that's people who really want to divorce, but they feel like they can't quite, I would say, escape, because possibly financial issues, or possibly they're afraid that if they leave and their partner, the co-parent, is not capable in some way, maybe has addiction or is narcissistic or something like that. They're really worried about the well-being of their child. And so I think those are the trickiest, saddest, so sad, those situations.
To switch gears a little bit, and just thinking about how you've really kind of expanded your practice outside the therapy room, of really trying to reach a broader audience or a broader client base, so to speak, through your podcast and the courses that you started. What would be some advice that you'd give other therapists that maybe are thinking about that, or thinking about expanding their practices in that way?
I would say find some issues, some populations, some topics that fascinate you, that you want to learn about no matter what. And so that you can't go wrong. Like whatever you build or don't build is kind of secondary, to make sure that you are just becoming more of an expert and enjoying the information that you're learning about, because I think that fuels our energy and helps us from getting burnt out in our profession. So so that would be step one, is learn, educate yourself, do some research, do some reading, do some online training, or now it's COVID, so it would have to probably be online training. Yeah. And then have somebody that you can talk this through. Maybe have a colleague who is also brainstorming, because it really helps to have somebody else listen to you and bounce some ideas back and forth.
Right. I know we had talked about part of your process in starting the podcast is you had worked with our mutual friend Joe Sanok and did some work with him. And I would echo that. I mean, just with anything that we do within private practice, I think it's always important to have a set of trusted peers and colleagues that you can bounce stuff off of and be able to share that information with, to be able to help you kind of flush through the details of it all and come up with a plan.
Right. Yeah. Oh, and I have one more thing, actually. So like we're doing now, when I talk with someone, when I'm in dialogue, it helps me think of something else. So this is a
sure.
Example.
Yeah.
But I just did a training for some colleagues, and I think that's really helpful too, because you can kind of see in lifetime what interests people, what their questions are. You can find out your blind spots. And so I think being able to offer a continuing ed to peers is a really valuable way to get some more expertise in your specialty.
Right.
And then other than that, I would say it's trial and error, because if somebody says that won't work or this will work, well, we don't know. We really don't know. So you have to kind of put yourself out there and keeping willing to tweak and change and edit and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think what you said earlier too, I think is so true, is being able to follow those things that you're passionate about. Because, again, people hear it from me all the time, and I sound like a broken record here, but you've got to start with your why you want to do anything, that whether it's in private, whether you want to go into private practice to begin with, or whatever direction you take. And I think what I love about what you're doing, Susan, is the fact that you've taken the, being able to offer therapy, one-to-one, which is the traditional way of providing therapy, in the context of the therapy room. And as we're recording this, we're in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And, so most all of us are online now in terms of, doing sessions in this way, but being able to take it that one-to-one to the one-to-many, I think is a way of just really kind of expanding your reach, not only your reach, but also diversifying your income in that way. Right. So, well, Susan, I know I want to be respectful of your time, and I'm so glad we got to have this conversation today. Tell folks how they can get in touch with you if they want to learn more about what you're doing and your podcast.
Sure. So I have a website, afterthefirstmarriage.com, and you can see my podcast there. People can sign up for a free e-course there, and you can email me. Love to hear from people. Like I said, I'm learning and growing as I get feedback. So I definitely want input. And thank you for inviting me today, Gordon. It's been fun.
Yes, and so glad you were with us. And we'll have links to all of this in the show notes and the show summary so people can access it quickly. And so be sure and tell my hometown hello. So I'm glad to get to know you, Susan.
It's a lovely town. Yes, and it's growing and it's lovely. So I will say hi to Carrie, North Carolina, for you.
Yes. Big shout out for Carrie. So, well, thanks, Susan, for being on the podcast, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon. Well, I'm so happy that Susan got to join me for the podcast, and it was really cool to talk to somebody in my hometown that was literally just down the street from where I grew up. So it's just that was just a neat experience. And be sure and check out Susan's resources and website, afterthefirstmarriage.com. And we'll have links in the show notes and the show summary here, for you to check out her things. And I think one big takeaway for me from Susan is, when thinking about your niche, and I do think it is a good idea to develop a niche or really find those areas within the therapy space, counseling space that you really are passionate about, that really speak to you, and that you really feel like you can do your best work. I think it's so important to identify that for yourself because, you're going to do better work that way, and you're going to stay energized, and you're less likely to get burnout if you're working with the kind of people and the populations that you feel most passionate about. So again, thanks, Susan, for being on the podcast, and be sure and check out her podcast and also her website and her information there. Also, just wanted to invite you to take advantage of getting the Google Workspace for Therapists course while it's still at the original price. As I said earlier, I'm in the middle of updating the course, and if you purchase it now, you'll get those updates as they come. And don't wait, because once I get it all updated and all situated, the price will go up. So be sure and check that out. Practiceoftherapy.com/G Suite course. And it's a big part of the changes is the changes in branding and the tweaks to some of the applications there. And plus, I'm going to have a few more bonus kinds of things in the course once I get all the updates there. So take advantage of that while it's at the current price. So, and also be sure and check out our sponsors for the podcast, TherapyNotes.com. They are the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers. They're who I use in my practice. Couldn't live without them. They've got a platform that will just help you in all aspects of your practice. And I use it in conjunction with Google Workspace. So it's very compatible with that and being able to integrate some of the functions there, like the calendar. What's really nice is I can look at my Google Calendar on my phone, and I've got it integrated with my TherapyNotes calendar, and it lets me know about my upcoming appointments and stuff with clients. So, and it does it in a HIPAA secure way. So that's a big plus there with that. With TherapyNotes. So check them out, therapynotes.com. And if you'll be sure and use the promo code Gordon, Gordon, you can try them out for 2 months free and with no questions asked. And also be sure and check out Green Oak Accounting, greenoakaccounting.com. They are the financial experts for private practice. They specialize in working exclusively with private practice owners, both solo practice owners and group practice owners, and helping them navigate the whole financial side of your practice. Julie Harris and her team will do a free consult with you to find out what you need and how they can point you in the right direction. So be sure and check them out, greenoakaccounting.com. And be sure and let them know that you heard about them here on the podcast. So I think that's got it for today. I've wrapped things up here. Thanks again for joining me for the podcast, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it, whether it be on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Stitcher or Google Podcasts. And now we're on Amazon Music and also Audible and a lot of other podcatchers out there. So wherever you might be listening to it, be sure and subscribe and leave us a review and a rating. That just helps other people find us. I know that our rankings are starting to go up. And, one other kind of milestone, I was looking at some of the metrics and stats for the podcast earlier this week, and we've well exceeded over 100,000 downloads, and we're averaging probably about 5,000 downloads a month. So those of you that are listening out there, thank you for joining me in this journey. I'm just so happy to be able to do this with you every week. So take care, folks, and we'll talk to you next week. Been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free private practice startup guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.